Good morning, Rich. What are you up to now?
Well, I'm getting ready for the next step in my face frame construction. I have to make a dado down each style to accept the side of the cabinet. That's just a particular way that I build my cabinet, and you'll see that later. What I wanted to go over was a safety point when setting up a dado blade. The first thing I want to say is this dado blade here is the best on the market. It's called a dial-a-width, and you can dial your adjustment to within 1/1000th of an inch to get the best fit. And it's just a lot more accurate than the shim style, and it gives you a lot more versatility. So what I do after I have my rough width of my dado blade set up in here, it comes with a gauge chart that tells you which parts you need to use for the width you need. You may have a new saw where you haven't plunged through your throat plate yet. So what I like to do is I put my throat plate in, and then I put my fence over the throat plate, and that will help hold it down. So if you didn't do this, the blade can hit the bottom of that and throw it up in your face.
You've got this blade, this throat plate is opened up, but it's not, it's not opened up enough to make a 3/4 inch dado, because you've only used it a couple times.
Yeah, we didn't use it for this width yet.
I see.
And then another thing is this will throw chips up also, because this is sort of like a Formica type material. So if you cover it with a block of wood and make sure your hand is well away. If your hand is at or past this groove in the table, you're well away from the blade. So then I'll start it up. Just plunge up with the blade. The blade before you move anything. And there you have it. Now your blade will fit in there without catching it or chipping it out. Okay, so what I'm doing now, I'm setting the height of my dado blade, and how I do that, I want to put a 1/4 inch deep dado in the back of my style. So I just take a tape measure, pull a 1/4 of an inch. This doesn't have to be exact, and I just make a pencil mark like that I will use to set the height of my blade. Now I kind of want to bring a high spot of the blade to the center of the opening, and that's what I'll use to set my blade. And you want to rock it back and forth like this to make sure that your highest point is at the level you want, and that looks good to me. Okay, I had my dado blade set to the height I wanted. I made an initial cut in a scrap piece to test the fit of my carcass material, which is this right here. This happens to be sold as 3/4 melamine, but it actually measures a 1/64 over 3/4. So that's the reason why I use this dial-a-width dado blade. Yeah, the plywood you buy these days, a lot of it comes from Europe, and it's in millimeters, and even the router bits, you can't match it with the router bits. So this is a really nice blade to have. So the initial cut I made, it fits, but it's just a little too tight for what I want, because you don't want it that tight when you're assembling the cabinet, because you don't want to have to force anything together. So what I did, I added 3 clicks to the dial on my blade, and I'm gonna test it again. That's better. That's what I want. Okay, so now the next step in my face frame build is making the dado for the sides of the cabinets in the styles. From here on out, we work with all the material face down. I have my lefts and my rights with the back of the style facing up. So now I know I have to flip it to make my cut in the saw. For this step, you're gonna wanna use feather boards. You got to keep this material tight to the fence, because it's important that it's an accurate cut. So this is a particular type of feather board I have. It's magnetic. These are very expensive. company is called Mag Switch, and they're available in any woodworking store. You can get them. Okay, so now I have my offset for my dado.
Your offset, it looks like 1/4 of an inch is where you want to be.
Yeah.
That was the scribe you talked about.
Yeah, in this case, this house is very consistent in the corners for being square, so I only need a 1/4 inch scribe. So now I'm gonna make my first cut. Test piece, and that's what I want right there. Not too tight, not too loose.
So what are we left here? It looks like we have 6 pairs that have the dado on the outside of each side set in about 1/4 of an inch.
Yes. Okay, so now I'm setting up to drill pocket hole screws in my face frame rails. And I always use pocket screws and glue to assemble my face frames because it's very accurate and strong. So the way I set up in that, if you come over here and look at the Craig jig, there's 3 offset holes. You can use any hole to position any piece of wood, or if you have a thin piece, all you need to do is just line up by eye. It's not an exact measurement you need here.
So what you're doing here is you're first testing the depth of your hole to make sure that it's just right.
Yeah, and when I put the piece in, you want to check to make sure you're sitting square in the tool. Because if you're not, and you're on an angle, it's going to throw your face frame out of square when you screw it together, or it won't pull tight.
Rich, show us how you set the depth of the pocket screw jig, the pocket hole jig.
Okay, when you're...
There's 2 parts to it, right?
Yeah, depending on the thickness of the material, whether it's 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, 1.5 inch, there's a gauge block and there's a set gauge on the bit. So when you're matching 2 same thickness woods, both the gauge block and the bit have to be set on 3/4, which is what I'm using.
I see, but you still want to test the depth, right?
Yeah, so now that I'm set in the tool, I'm going to turn the vacuum on, put my bit in, and you just drill in until you bottom out on the gauge block there. So now, when I
So you
release
bottom
it,
out on the stop of the drill bit.
yeah, so there's your hole pattern.
Well, that's really professional looking.
Okay, so now I want to test it. So what I did here, I drilled 2 holes and I put 1 screw in and bottomed it out. So now when I put the block together how it's supposed to go, I know my screw is just right.
It's getting well into the flesh of the style.
Yeah, and it's not going to come
coming
through the face.
All right.
So now, when you want to assemble your piece, always make sure you set the pieces flush. And you always want to clamp them down because you need to keep the faces flush, or else when you screw the screw in, the force of it will pull and misalign the blocks or the face frames. So you want to go in slow. Let the screw thread itself in and just bottom it out. You don't need to jam them in or go in fast and hard with it. So the screw acts as the clamp. So when you glue the joint and screw it, you can go right to the sanding station and start sanding it because it's going to stay put.
All right. Rich, you've shown us how to set the depth for our pocket hole, so now you're ready to proceed with the real stuff.
Yeah, so this is my actual rail. So one thing you want to do when you set it in the tool, you know, you don't have to measure anything, just, you know, eyeball the center marks of the holes so you're well within your piece. And then I like to take a square, and since it's a thin rail, I like to make sure I am perpendicular to the tool base. Because if you're not, and your hole is cockeyed, it's going to throw your face frame off, or it may not pull a joint tight. So now I will...
Just don't worry about the vacuum for this
I don't need
purpose.
the vacuum. You just drill in until the collar on the bit bottoms out on the jig block, okay? And that's your holes.
Very professional looking, and then you'll drill the other side of the rail.
Yeah. So again.
Nice. So you've got all of your rails drilled for pocket screws. Nicely organized. Really looks good. Very professional looking result here with this Craig tool. So what'll be next for us, Chief?
Well, we'll start to assemble face frames, and to set them up, just make sure your scribe is to the outside with the material face down, and everything goes together with the face down.
So we're working from the back side.
Yeah. And when you cut face frame material, remember your stiles always run up past your rail and down past your rail. You never put a cabinet together like this.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's always like this.
The rail comes to the stile.
Yeah, you want to see...
And not the other way around.
Yeah, because if you had a cabinet just ending in the open space, you would want to see a finished edge like that. You wouldn't want to see the end grain of the top or bottom rail.
So in the next step, you'll show us some techniques that you've developed, very simple techniques without using expensive tools, that you can assemble this and get it nice and square in uniform.